Hello and welcome to another episode of Coaching from the Heart. I am your co host, Tyler Thurman, and joining me as always is my good friend, colleague, and fellow show host here, Harold Feddersen.
Hi, Tyler.
Hey, Harold, thanks for being with me again today. And
Thank you.
yes, our topic for the day, as our listeners have probably figured out from the title, is a return to love. And before we jump into that, I just want to give out how you can reach both Harold and I. So, Harold, how can people find you if they're interested in the conversation today and maybe they want to reach out to you or want to work with you on a deeper level?
There are a couple places where I post myself out there. My blog is hearttohand.wordpress.com, and my Facebook page is The Awakening Heart.
Fantastic. And you can find me, as always, at my website, www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. You can find all my contact information there, as well as all sorts of fun free content. So let's go ahead and get started with today's topic. And we chose the title that it mirrors the title of a kind of an older book by Marianne Williamson called A Return to Love. And while we're not going to talk about the content of the book so much today, specifically, we both loved. First of all, we knew we were going to have a conversation about love, right? And we really liked the language of a return to love, because in both of our experiences, it's a reference to, it's kind of the signposts pointing us in the direction of a deeper kind of love than most of us are familiar with. Um, and we wanted to spend some time discussing that, but really, in order to do that, we first have to broach the subject of the world's predominant view of love. What our society tells us is love, and kind of debunk a few things there in order to get to what's underneath that, to that deeper love, to that return to a more essential, kind of fundamental kind of love. So, do you want to start us off there, Harold?
Sure. So I think probably the most um, talked about type of love is referred to as romantic love, which we've all experienced to some degree in our life. Um, and romantic love, it's what all the movies are made of. It's what all the songs are sung about. But romantic love is based in the ego, and it is conditional.
Hmm.
So, because as you know, as in all the literature everywhere, you either fall in love or you fall out of love. Like it's something that you're either in or out. So when you look at it and you start looking at, when I am in love with someone, the world is so amazing, and there's some biochemistry stuff that happens that makes us feel awesome. Um, but then we can also fall out of love with people in the same fashion. You can fall in love and out of love with someone in the same day, even. Um, so if we look at it a little bit closer, we find um, conditions within this type of love. So uh, you and I had a conversation about agreements. Is that last week or the week before? I can't remember.
Couple of weeks back.
Um, okay. And romantic love is a good example of people meeting or not meeting the conditions we set up. So when someone's meeting our conditions, oh, we just love them. Oh, we're so in love. And when they stop meeting our conditions, um, something happens with that type of love. Tends to dissipate or fade away or something. So the origin point of our conversation is about that. It's about the love that we all just take for granted as being love,
Mm.
and yet, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I was just gonna say that just to kind of follow on that line of thinking that it's something that we wouldn't generally think to call into question, in my experience, because it's
Yeah,
kind of there's a fairly generally accepted model for love, right? It happens between two people and only two people, right? And it's a unique thing between those two people, and it's kind of something that's I mean, you said it perfectly. You can fall in it, you can fall out of it. It's something that's one day it's there, the next day it's not. It's kind of whimsical, uh, but there's we. It's almost like we think that it's something that just occurs magically either in within the relationship as kind of this dance, or it's to do with finding the right person, right? And so in that case it's like it's a circumstantial thing, right? If I just find this right person with this right set of characteristics and the kind of personality that I like, um, then I'm gonna get to have this love. And as the movies and stories would indicate, live happily ever after,
hmm
right? But um, if you've ever been involved in that kind of exchange, it's not quite like that.
it doesn't play out quite as smoothly as Disney wants us to believe.
Yeah, yeah. So it's it's something that first and foremost we've got to be willing to look and say, what is this thing called love that I've been taught is love? Is that really um, is it all it's cracked up to be? And is it something that I want? Um, so there's all sorts of stuff that goes with romantic love, right? And there's actually different words to describe it. There it could be lust, right? It's a love at first sight. Well, you might just be horny, right? That's often part of it, right? Um, there's and so that's more of a chemistry thing, right? Like you said, there's all sorts of biochemical reactions going on. There's a a codependency type situation that happens. And I don't necessarily mean it in this derogatory psychological use that term is usually used in. But what I mean is almost all romantic relationships are codependent relationships in the sense that, just like you were saying, Harold, that we talked about last week or the week before, um, what's going on is our love, we have a love sort of pointed at that person, right? It's a love for that other person. But if you look closely, it's not unconditional. It's not always and forever. I don't know anybody, I've never talked to anybody who's had the experience of love and that's it. Right? Have you? Just out of curiosity.
That's a good question. I don't know actually.
I've certainly never met them in anybody like that in person, right? There
Mm,
may be some enlightened people out there that might mirror that fairly closely, but usually our experience in relationships is um, it's variable, right?
hmm
It's not even variable year to year. It's variable moment to moment. Um, And the most important thing to understand about that, in my experience, is it's not because the other person is changing or the relationship is always changing. It's more to do with the flow of thinking going through our minds. But more importantly to this conversation, the the flow of conditions that we have set up for that other person, which harkens back to that conversation we had last week.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's not unconditional, even though we like to say that it is. I certainly have been guilty of that in relationships. Oh, I unconditionally love you, but what I mean, what most of us mean when we say I love you is I love you unless and until,
Or I love you because.
or I love you because,
Yep.
right? So it's either, yeah, it's in the positive or the negative, right? It's it's here's the conditions where I won't love you if you do these things, and here's what I fell in love with you. Here's why I fell in love with you, right? Here's the reasons or conditions that I fell in love with you for, and you better keep providing those, right? Because we've got, like last week we talked about those unspoken expectations for that other person to keep behaving in certain ways so as to provide us with the love uh, that we think we're getting from them, right? Because you and I we kind of talked about it a little bit as love as a commodity, right? As something that gets manufactured or created, uh, by two people
Hmm.
interacting in a certain way.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things is it does come back again and again to conditions. What conditions have I set up that I have to have in order for me to feel love for this person? And then I think one of the common things is when people um, are no longer meeting the conditions, that's when we generally go looking for someone who's going to now meet those conditions.
Right. Or we ourselves, without knowing it, have created additional conditions for this person, right? Because that's kind of what our mind does, right? It comes up, and a condition, that's just another word for a judgment, right? Or a thought. It's a thought condition, but really it's a judgment. It says, uh, this, uh, I have judged this as not okay with me, right? And what that really means is I have given this behavior or this person or this circumstance permission to limit my capacity for love. And I don't think we know that's going on most of the time. I think there's a lot of sort of hidden components to what we call romantic love, and really just our relationships in general, that it really makes a big difference if we can kind of uncover those a little bit so that we can open up to something a bit deeper, right? And I just wanted to put in just real quick, Harold, that it's not just that we say I'm gonna love you sometimes but not other times, right? It's that in our placing conditions, what we don't realize that we've also done is we've said, going beyond just the one relationship, I've said, I'm going to love you and only you with all my heart. And
Till death do us part.
Right. Well, yeah. Right. But emphasis on the you and only you, because what we've essentially done there is we've said, I'm not going to love the rest of the world with all my heart. Anybody else I meet with all my heart. Um, and so it doesn't mean that we're not going to love them oftentimes at all. It's usually just not as much, right? And so we've effectively put restrictor plates on, for all you racing fans out there. We're going to put restrictor plates on our capacity to love, not just the one person, but all people. And then we get really confused. This is where we get confused with form and content, right? So we get confused with things like sex and love. So if I were to say, so one of the common complaints people have when I bring this kind of subject up is, well, I can't love everyone in the world the way that I love my spouse, my partner, because that would mean I'd have to have sex with everybody, right? Or that would mean I would have to have some kind of close physical relationship with everybody. Um, and that's just a confusion of form and content, right? So we can love somebody with all of our heart, with every fiber of our being, and not have sex with that person. Um, but that's kind of a foreign concept to most people. Right, Harold?
Yes. Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Um, so now I'm thinking, so how do we start to move? So if we've established that the type of love that we're talking about or that we're sold in the media is conditional, and we want to return to love,
Hmm.
what do we need to be doing or undoing or
Yeah, no, that's a great segue. But I first want to just add in, right, that we're not demonizing conditional love, right? That's part of our experience here on life, on planet Earth, right? That's what we're taught, that's what we know. Um, it's not bad, it's not sinful, it's nothing like that. It's just we're asking you to question it a little bit and see that there's the potential for going even deeper with it and expanding with the person you're with, as well as expanding even beyond that, to other people as well, uh, because it's really a conversation more about us than our sort of physical relationships. So you asked the question, what if we're going to look at it, we're going to see it's not all it's cracked up to be, or it's not everything that we were sold, right? The happily ever after and forever and ever, amen. Um, then what's the other option? And so there is a different kind of love, a different experience of love that I think if we all stopped a minute and just kind of, let our minds settle a little bit, did some did some soul searching, we're all kind of aware there's something like that available to us. Um, but you asked the question, so I'll let you start with the answer, Harold. How do we get to that? What is that, and how do we get to it?
I think I like what you said. We're not demonizing conditional love, and of course not, because the thing we find with conditional love is that it leads to suffering. So we go, from one person to the next person to the next person, looking for people who will unconditionally meet our conditions, so as to be in a state of perpetual happiness. But it's conditional happiness, so it's actually it has no real substance to it. So one of the reasons why we want to go deeper into this is to start searching for a place where um, our suffering begins to lighten and potentially end.
Right.
Um, so if conditions are, the more conditions we place on someone or on ourselves, the more suffering becomes available. Then obviously the process is to begin to release the conditions from ourselves and from the other person, so as to be able to access um, what I guess we're calling unconditional love. Um,
Real love,
real
true
love,
love. No,
whatever.
that's
Yeah. Um, and I think, I think we have all experienced this. We have all experienced where we have been present to another being, and when we're in a space where there are no judgments or conditions, there's just this deep appreciation and love for that being.
mm,
I think I think one of the easier places to access this quickly is with parents with children.
mm,
When there's just this overwhelming love that just takes you when all of the veils of conditions and judgments fall away. So it's easy for this conversation to become this trek or this path um, towards love, but it's always just right here if you're willing to just drop the curtain of your conditions and your judgments. Then all of a sudden you can be present in a way that wasn't available before. And I think you and I kind of come at this from the same place, that once all of our veils drop away, what is found is love.
yeah, yeah. That's beautifully said. Um, and it's I think it's important to point out that this is a love that doesn't have to be for something either. It's just it just is, right? It doesn't have to be targeted necessarily at a person or a thing or a cat, right? So we both have pets, so we know what that's about. So, but I just want to point that out, and I also wanted uh, to just go back to the title, right? A return to love presupposes it's a place we've been before. It's an experience we've had before, and it 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 points us in the direction of it not just being an emotion, it not just being a chemical reaction. It's like a spiritual essence, right? Because if we as people were say a hollow shell, you know, or an onion, right? You get to the end of it and there's nothing there. Um, once, like you were saying, Harold, once the veil has been lifted, if that's what we were, there wouldn't be love there. There'd be emptiness. So the fact that when the judgments drop, the personal thinking kind of falls away for a moment. Our opinions about the world and how everything's supposed to be and how people are supposed to behave, how I'm supposed to behave, and our past and future. Once all that falls away, it's not emptiness. I mean, you could describe it as that, but it's beautiful, right? Love is just a word we give to it. Um, sometimes I talk about it as the peace of God, right? It's this kind of divine, essential part of ourselves that we've just we put a lot of layers of our own thinking on top of, uh, and so we don't notice it's there. And in fact, largely we've forgotten it's there altogether. And that's why we're having this conversation. Um, but it's not. I think I mentioned in a couple weeks back in one of the shows. It's not uh, a manufacturing uh, project. It's an uncovering, right? It's an archaeological dig to find our long lost love, right? But it's a love that goes deeper than I love you, right? It's just a place of love that we can come to, and then everything we gaze upon benefits from that, right? Because it's with us, it's in us, and so it colors everything we do and everything we see. Every person we interact with, we're going to interact with from a place of love. It doesn't have to be any kind of sexual component or anything like that. It's just this deep and profound sense of well-being that lives within us all that, quite frankly, we've forgotten about, and we have no idea how to get back there. Um, but really, there's nothing we have to do. It's a recognition that we ourselves, as a mind, as thinking minds, have conjured limitations to this love, and then of course we forgot that we put the limitations there. So all we have to do is drop them, right? Relinquish our investment in them. You don't have to keep feeding that beast, right? This person's not doing things the way they should, and that person's behaving in this way, so I hate them, and all of those shenanigans that we are up to most days, most of the time. Right? Judge, 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 judge. We are judging machines, categorizing machines. I put this person above this person, and that person below that person. I love this one the most, and that one the second. All of that stuff. We can just, like you said, it's now. It's not later once I've achieved it. Once I've gone through our famous 10-step process, right? It's a beautiful place. It's home. It's home when we've forgotten that we were lost. Right? But we can return there in any single moment, regardless of what's going on around us. Now that's a bit of an advanced lesson in love, right? Or the releasing of obstacles to love. But the more we look, the more we see, the more we sink into our heart. That's what this show's called, coaching from the heart. Could be living from the heart, right? but it's available in all of us. Anything you want to add to that, Harold?
You had said early on that usually the conditional love is one person and another person,
Yeah.
which I think is one of the most uh, common parts of conditional love, because there has to be a conditioner and a conditionee. So there has to be two. There's a person who
Right.
sets up the condition and a person who has to conform to it.
Yeah. It's like a victim and a victimizer, essentially, right?
Yeah, that's part of that codependency. But um, the process to return to love is, you start to, as you drop or let go of the conditions that you've placed on yourself or the other, as well as the judgments, you do end up letting go of that me and them,
Mm.
the duality of it, uh, and you start to experience. It's almost like as we drop our judgments, because our judgments and our conditions, basically, that's what makes up what we are as separate beings in the world. So as we practice dropping those away, um, we begin to find that there isn't such a solid person, if you will, running the show. So eventually, you do get to this place where instead of there being a me and you, the me that I've always associated myself with drops away, and then what's left is just this presence and this
Mm.
love that gets to then move into the world. Because a lot of people will ask, well, what do I do? What do I do to be more loving? And it's ironic because you do less. You don't. There's nothing to do. It's just um, let go of all the things that you're holding on to. Um, because underneath of all the underneath of all of the veils is just the light of what you are.
Yeah,
That's always there.
I love you said the presence. There's a presence, and it's love's presence. It's the presence of love, right? Like
Hmm.
that's what it is. Now again, that's just language. But it's the essence of who we are. Um, Now I want to just point out the behavioral thing, right? Because I think that's important because we get it confused. Um, you just mentioned that, you know, what do I do to be more loving, or how do I behave in a more loving manner? Well, there is no loving behavior, right? There's Because it will be unique to each person, the behavior will be, right? From their presence of love's presence, they're sinking into that. Um, like, they're gonna they could do just about anything from a place of love. Now, there are some things that are much less likely to occur from a place of love, right? Um, and like physical abuse, that kind of thing. But it's not about behavior, right? It's it's a place we can all, it's like the truth of who we are behind all of the masks that we've created to present to the world. Um, but it's formless. It's formless. Behavior is a form, right? That our bodies act. They're forms that our bodies act out. So it could be anything, right? You know, it could occur to us from a place of love to put our hand on somebody's shoulder, right? To give somebody a hug. It could occur to us to give someone distance, physical distance, right? Um, it could be anything. So there is no, you know, behavior of love that's the key, right? It's the key to love. No, behavior flows from the activity in our mind. And if there's not a lot of activity, then the presence of love will shine through and we'll behave accordingly. But it's going to be unique to you in whatever situation you're in. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
It almost becomes y- y- you get to a place where love is just moving through you. Like you just become the vessel um, through which love moves. And I think of one of the analogies I like is the wind. You
mm,
know, like you think of the wind moving through a valley, a mountain valley. You don't you don't say, well, what is the wind gonna do? Like, how do I be more windy? What is the wind supposed to, we don't, that's not how it goes. Just the wind is just gonna do what the wind is gonna do. Love
yeah,
will move as love moves.
right.
If you're trying to figure it out, that's probably a sign you're up in your noggin. And that's not the place where we can. Love doesn't really move through us when we're in our heads, because that's where all our conditions and judgments are born, and
Sure,
um,
sure.
we have to take the elevator down, as I like to say, take the elevator down into our hearts.
Right, right. Yeah, and I just want to take this opportunity to kind of bring us back to the romantic love conversation or the conditional love conversation and just kind of meld the two a little bit because um, first of all, we're all kind of it's fluid, right? We've either got a lot of thinking going on and we're totally up in our heads and we're analytical and um, we're not coming from a very loving place, or we're coming from a more essentially loving place, right? That or that presence of love. Um, and so, what we can begin to do in our whatever relationships we're in, right? Because in a lot of ways, this does become a relationship conversation because it is our relationships with other people where we get to explore this the deepest oftentimes. And so you don't need to leave whatever relationship you're in, right, to go find true love or that spiritual kind of love that we're talking about. It's there within you. And in whatever relationship you're in, whether it's romantic, it could even be a business relationship, right? You can begin to access that deeper love, that unconditional love in that relationship now. And so you can begin to let the conditions fall away for that person that you're already with. That if it's a relationship, it feels like it's stagnating or it's growing old or you're getting tired of that person. That person's no longer meeting your quote unquote needs, right? Um, that's the classroom, right? This is where we learn to dive back into ourselves and let that essential love shine through. And it's the best classroom. The relationships we're already in. We get to look at the conditions that we've put up for them, which are essentially saying, if you do this, if you behave in these ways, I can't be okay. Right? So we get to see where we do that and then let go of that. Right? We get to say, oh, it's not them. that's the source of my love or my hate or discomfort or misery, right? They're not the source of either of it. It's this river that runs deep within us, right? That we all have access to, but it's us. If we're miserable, it's because I've put limitations on that love, not my partner. And so we can begin to, as we learn more and more, to just let go of what we're doing, stop investing in all this judgmental thinking we have for this other person. Then we get to have a more and more wonderful relationship with this other person, not because anything has changed in the relationship, because I myself have uncovered, have returned to love. Go back to the title of the show. Anything you want to add, Harold?
Well, listening to you actually reminded me of I remember someone hired me because their intention was to leave their spouse. And as we entered the journey of coaching, within a fairly short period of time, the person had decided that their relationship was absolutely fabulous, actually, because they had created so many barriers between them and the love that they are. And yet, on the other hand, the opposite is also true. I've worked with people who ended up leaving the marriage they were in.
Right.
For me, for me, it doesn't really, as you said, the form doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What matters is what um, what you're willing to let go of to allow the presence of love to run through your life.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, like, what you do in your life, it matters to some degree, but it doesn't matter to a great degree.
Yeah. That that brings to mind just this whole exploration. It's really it's an exploration of self, right? It's to know love is to know ourselves, right? Without all the bells and whistles that we've added on. um, and it's just it's this beautiful exploration that we can all jump into in any moment, any relationship we're in currently. Like you said, the form doesn't matter. You don't have to be in a romantic relationship to explore this unconditional love, the spiritual love, this deeper presence of love. It doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter who we're with. That's the beauty of it, and that's why it doesn't matter so much what we're up to in the world. In that sense, it. I mean, we don't really quite understand the full implications of the word unconditional, right? It's far-reaching. It's, it literally means zero conditions that we can't experience that love. Conditions are of the physical universe, right? Or they're of our own thinking. But they're usually about circumstances, right? Some kind of, you know, some kind of condition. And there's all sorts of examples of people who have shown us this, right? Spiritual teachers throughout history that have led by example. They've demonstrated, you know, uh, I love you no matter what, even though, you know, Jesus, Buddha, I'm sure there's some more recent examples that are not coming to mind, but these people who say, no, it is unconditional. And then what we do is we say, oh, they're special somehow. They're better than me. They have access to something I don't. And then because we've said that, we've made that up as a culture, we've essentially cut ourselves off from the truth of who we are. Because we don't even think that's possible, right? Now, I'm not asking you to go out in extreme circumstances and try to experience yourself as love, right? That wouldn't be kind to yourself or anybody else, for that matter. Um,
Well, that would be the ego setting up some kind of condition to prove to itself that
exactly. Yeah,
it's
that's
love.
that's that's just the game the ego would play, right? Our ego mind would play to try to again get us away from the truth of who we are, to limit that, to hide it.
And
Uh,
yet at the same time, as we move through our day, we will be given the opportunity to find out where we are in the spectrum
yeah,
of
sure.
completely selfish and conditional, or to the place where we've let go of our conditions and the self that we hold on to.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's feedback all the time,
Hmm.
right? Uh, Now, we're not paying attention most of the time. So we
Most of the time, we're too busy doing something that there's
we're
too much
and you know
activity.
what we're too busy doing is trying to live into conditions that we've set up for ourselves,
Hmm.
that that we think we need for us to be okay. Not really on a physical level. I'm not talking about physical needs, but spiritually, emotionally.
Yeah,
We Yeah, go ahead.
this this conversation actually almost presupposes that we have an established practice for being present in the world.
Hmm.
Because you have to be really aware of what you're doing in order to see, um, to see what you're doing and to see what in fact you need to let go of. Um,
Right.
so I just kind of realized just how, uh, this sounds, I don't know, for you and I, this is kind of this is where we live, but um, for some people there's actually a lot of practice that happens before in the just being present. Some
Hmm.
people there, you see it all the time. Their minds they're so wrapped up in their minds, and their minds are so busy that they can't actually even just see.
Right.
Like, wow, you're so busy. You're actually completely separate from life in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So there really is a willingness that it all starts with, right? A willingness to look within.
Hmm.
Whether it's a practice or not, I don't really know if that's required. Maybe, uh, but I do know we have to be willing on some level to say there's got to be a better way, right? There's got to be something more than this life I've set up for myself. We don't know we've set it up for ourselves, right? But this
Hmm.
life that I'm living, right? I've got a course taught by a guy named Ken Wapnick about the Course in Miracles, and it's called "The Unexamined Life Isn't Worth Living." Um, and he also adds on later, the unexamined mind isn't worth having, and because there's all sorts of stuff going on in there that we've set up for ourselves as obstacles to love and peace. Just thinking, right? Just thinking obstacles, right? But we don't even know that we have a mind sometimes. We don't even know. We haven't ever looked within. No one ever told us to look within. The world says look without. It's out there. The answer's out there. It's in that person. You know, I'll feel love once I get that person. Right?
It's in
Once
this
I possess them.
this dead person's got it. You gotta go read their stuff. They've got
Yeah, yeah. So it's it really does start with let's 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 start the journey within. Let's take a look. Let's explore. Um, and it's okay if you don't know where to look at first, right? It's probably going to take some practice. You haven't exercised your spiritual or your inner sight for a while. Most of us haven't. So it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel foreign.
hmm
But that doesn't mean it's not a journey worth taking. So anything else you want to add, Harold? So there's one more thing I just wanted to add in. Um, this is very specific, but it almost always comes up and I'm just springing this on you, so we'll go with it. But that it almost always comes up in the conversation of unconditional love, right? Which is some kind of abuse, right? And this is another example of a confusion of levels or a confusion of form versus content, or form versus source. So what people have said to me, and I hear all the time, is it can go two ways, right? I can't love that person because they did this to me, or they'll say, oh, so I have to stay with this person because I have the capacity to love them, even though they are currently doing these things to me. And I just want to bring that up because it almost always comes up in this conversation. And all that is a confusion of form and content. So what I mean by that is, in a nutshell, you can love someone from a distance, right? I would never suggest necessarily that somebody who's being physically abused or even verbally, um, you know, uh, getting a lot of unpleasantness there, um, that you have to stay in physical proximity within that relationship. Um, all it means is you have the capacity for love, even though you've had some awful things happen to you or are currently having awful things happen to you. It's just speaking to a capacity for something that's within all of us. It doesn't have anything to do with should I stay or should I go, right? That in a lot of ways, it doesn't really matter because we always have the capacity for love. So you get to decide, right? Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? Do you want to learn more about the love within you while you're in this relationship or while you're in a different one, right? Different classroom, same curriculum for all relationships essentially. So I just wanted to add that in, that please don't get it confused that I'm saying you need to stay with this person that's either physically or verbally, um, you know, being kind of awful to you, right? It just means wherever you are, whoever you're with, you have the capacity to look within and discover for yourself there's more to you than you previously thought. More beauty, more love. Anything you want to add in there?
Well, if you're not safe, then that's something that needs to be addressed
Sure,
right out of the
absolutely.
gates. If you're not safe, that needs to be dealt with because you
Yeah.
can't.
And this
It's
isn't necessarily the conversation for you, right? Just have that one after you get to
yeah.
safety.
Go make sure you're safe. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Cool. So I'm glad you said that because that's what I was trying to say, but you said it better. Okay, Harold. So I think it's a great place to kind of wrap up the show. But if you enjoyed this conversation about love and any of our past conversations, feel free to reach out to either Harold or myself, and we'd be happy to have a conversation with you. We do this professionally. We're professional transformative coaches. We work with people one-on-one and in groups, and we coach and teach people about this kind of thing, right? About going deeper within yourself and having a more wonderful experience of life. So if you're interested in that, you can find me, Tyler Thurman, at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com, and Harold.
You can find me if you're on Facebook, The Awakening Heart, and if you're a blog person, my blog is hearttohand.wordpress.com. And it's interesting, actually, Tyler, that I was thinking yesterday, almost always the conversation comes back to this, back to love, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. We could literally title all of our conversations love, but for variety's sake, we'll use different words.
Yeah.
So, again, thank you for joining us, and with all the love in the world, we'll hopefully see you next week. All right.